A casual diner visit turns into a moment of humiliation when a waitress lets her prejudice dictate her actions. Little does she know the man sitting at her table holds the keys to her future. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Emily wiped down another table at Joe's diner. Her uniform was stained with coffee and grease from the morning rush. She moved mechanically between tables, her mind wandering to the pile of unpaid bills sitting on her kitchen counter. The latest one, a rejection letter from the art supply store about her credit application, stung the most. The diner was a typical American establishment. Vinyl booths, laminate tables, and the constant smell of coffee and bacon. Emily had worked there for 3 years, ever since her dreams of art school collapsed under financial reality. Now, at 25, she spent her days refilling coffee cups instead of painting canvases. The morning regulars occupied their usual spots. In booth 3, Mr. Henderson nursed his third cup of coffee while working on his crossword puzzle. The window seats were filled with office workers grabbing breakfast before their 9-to-5 shifts. Emily watched them, noting their pressed shirts and polished shoes, symbols of the stability she craved. A group of young professionals occupied the corner booth, their laughter cutting through the diner's usual murmur. They were celebrating something, a promotion, maybe, or a birthday. Their joy felt like a personal affront to Emily. She watched them order another round of mimosas, calculating their bill in her head and wondering if the tip would help cover her overdue rent. Their carefree attitude reminded Emily of her own group of friends from art school, before student loans and reality forced them all to drop out. Now those friends were scattered across the country, some working corporate jobs, others still chasing their dreams with trust funds to cushion their falls. Emily had neither option. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Emily from her thoughts. Marcus walked in, dressed in a well-fitted suit that spoke of success. He carried himself with quiet confidence, scanning the diner for an empty seat. Emily's stomach tightened. She'd seen him around the neighborhood, usually heading to the law office down the street. Instead of approaching his table, Emily busied herself with refilling coffee cups at the far end of the diner. She could feel his presence like a weight on her shoulders, but she convinced herself she was too busy to take his order. Other customers were waiting, she told herself, though she knew it wasn't true. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. Emily moved between tables, deliberately keeping her back to Marcus's section. She took orders from new customers who had arrived after him, making a show of writing down their preferences for eggs and toast. Her hands shook slightly as she delivered plates to other tables. Each time she passed near Marcus, she could feel his eyes following her. The weight of her actions settled in her chest, but she pushed the feeling aside. She was tired, overworked, stressed about money. She didn't need the complexity of confronting her own prejudices today. The other servers noticed her behavior. Sally, working the counter, shot her questioning looks. Tom, visible through the kitchen window, frowned as he observed the scene unfolding. But Emily continued her practiced avoidance, letting the minutes tick by as Marcus sat unattended. Tom seemed to slow down in that morning hour. The diner's usual rhythm felt off kilter, like a record playing at the wrong speed. Emily's movements became increasingly mechanical as she focused on maintaining her deliberate ignorance of Marcus's presence. She could feel the situation building towards something inevitable, but she couldn't bring herself to change course. The morning light grew stronger, highlighting the dust motes floating in the air and the scratches on the worn tabletops. Emily's world had narrowed to a series of mechanical tasks. Pour coffee, take orders, deliver plates. Anything to avoid acknowledging the man sitting patiently in her section, waiting for service that she had chosen to deny him. The tension in the diner became palpable as Marcus raised his hand, trying to get Emily's attention. She pretended not to notice, busying herself with arranging sugar packets at the far end of the counter. Other customers began to exchange uncomfortable glances, the morning chatter dying down to hushed whispers. Tom watched the scene unfold from his position at the grill. A Vietnam veteran in his 60s, he'd seen enough discrimination in his lifetime to recognize it instantly. Through the service window, he observed Emily's deliberate avoidance of Marcus's table, his weathered face creasing with disappointment. "Emily," Tom called out, his voice carrying across the diner. "Table 7 needs service." He gestured pointedly toward Marcus's table. Emily approached the kitchen window, her face flushed. "I'm handling things, Tom," she said in a low voice. "I've got other customers to take care of first." "That gentleman's been sitting there for 15 minutes, Tom replied, keeping his voice steady but firm. "We don't do that here. Not in my kitchen, not in this diner." Emily's defenses rose immediately. "You don't understand," she hissed, glancing over her shoulder. "I'm dealing with so much right now. The rent's late again, my car's making that noise, and the art supply store rejected my credit application. I can't handle any more complications today." Tom continued flipping pancakes, his movements precise and measured. "And how does any of that justify ignoring a paying customer?" "It's not about—" Emily started, then lowered her voice even further. "It's not what you think. I can't deal with the pressure right now. Everyone's watching, judging. Do you know what it's like to feel like you're always one step away from complete failure?" The kitchen's heat pressed against them as Tom turned to face her directly. "You're better than this, Emily. I've watched you show kindness to every grumpy regular who's walked through that door. What makes this customer different?" Emily's hands gripped her order pad tightly. "You don't get it. Everything's falling apart. And I'm supposed to just smile and pretend everything's fine? I'm tired of being the one who has to accommodate everyone else while my own life crumbles." The breakfast rush continued around them, but in that moment, the space between Emily and Tom felt isolated from the rest of the diner. The sizzle of bacon and the clinking of plates provided a backdrop to their tense conversation. "We all have our struggles," Tom said, sliding a plate of eggs onto the pass. "But taking them out on innocent people doesn't make them any lighter to bear." Emily felt tears threatening to form. I didn't mean to." She stopped, wrestling with emotions she couldn't quite name. The stress of her financial situation, her failed dreams, and now this confrontation about her behavior. It all felt overwhelming. The diner's atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Regular customers who knew Emily as the friendly, efficient server were watching the scene with confusion. The young professionals in the corner had grown quiet, their celebration subdued by the obvious tension. Tom's next words were gentle but firm. "Sometimes our worst moments show us who we really are, Emily, and more importantly, who we want to be. That man deserves the same respect as anyone else who walks through that door." Emily stood frozen, her order pad hanging limply at her side. The weight of Tom's words pressed against her conscience, forcing her to confront the ugliness of her actions. But admitting her prejudice felt like adding another failure to an already too long list. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, highlighting the dust motes in the air and the tired expressions on everyone's faces. The typical breakfast rush rhythm had been disrupted, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness of the drama unfolding in their usually peaceful diner. Marcus stood up from his table, his movements deliberate and controlled. The diner fell silent as he walked to the counter where Emily stood. His face remained composed, but his eyes held a mix of disappointment and determination. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the quiet diner. "I've been sitting here for 20 minutes. Is there a reason I haven't been served?" Emily froze, her hands clutching a coffee pot. The direct confrontation stripped away her ability to pretend this wasn't happening. I've been busy with other customers," she managed to say. "Other customers who came in after me," Marcus pointed out. He placed his hands flat on the counter, leaning forward slightly. "Let's be honest about what's happening here. You've been avoiding my table because I'm black." The words hung in the air like smoke. Several customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Emily's face flushed red, but she couldn't find the words to deny his accusation. "I'm a partner at Johnson and Myers law firm down the street," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "I've worked cases involving discrimination. I've seen people lose everything because they couldn't get past their prejudices. But I never expected to experience it during my morning coffee run." Emily's defenses rose. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "This isn't about—" I mean, I'm not. Not what? Not racist. Marcus's voice remained calm, but carried an edge of steel. Let me tell you what I understand. I understand working twice as hard to get half as far. I understand having doors closed in my face because of assumptions people make about me. I understand watching people clutch their purses tighter when I walk by, even in this $1,000 suit. The diner's usual breakfast sounds had ceased entirely. Every eye was on the confrontation unfolding at the counter. Tom stood in the kitchen doorway, watching with a grim expression. I grew up in a neighborhood where success meant surviving to adulthood, Marcus continued. I worked my way through college, through law school. I spent years proving myself over and over again to people who assumed I didn't belong. And now, in 2024, I still can't get a cup of coffee without being reminded that some people will always see my skin color before they see my humanity. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. The weight of her actions crashed down on her as Marcus spoke. Her personal struggles suddenly seemed hollow compared to the systematic barriers he'd faced. I'm not here to make you feel guilty, Marcus said, noting her tears. I'm here because silence enables prejudice to continue. Every time we let these small acts of discrimination slide, we make it easier for bigger injustices to occur. Emily tried to speak, but Marcus held up his hand. You know what's ironic? I noticed your sketchbook earlier. I'm on the board of the local arts council. We provide grants to emerging artists. But right now, all I see is someone who judged me before knowing anything about who I am. The silence in the diner was deafening. Emily's world had narrowed to this moment, to the realization that her actions had revealed an ugly truth about herself she hadn't wanted to face. Her dreams of artistic success felt tainted by the knowledge that she'd become exactly the kind of person she'd always claimed to despise. Marcus straightened up, adjusting his tie. The question isn't whether prejudice exists. It's what we choose to do when we recognize it in ourselves. He looked around the diner, making eye contact with several customers. That's a choice we all have to make, every day. Tom stepped out from behind the kitchen counter, wiping his hands on his apron. I was 16 when I first experienced real discrimination, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. It wasn't because of my race. It was because I came back from Vietnam different. People looked at me like I was broken, dangerous. Linda, the diner's manager, emerged from her office, drawn by the unusual quiet. She assessed the situation with practiced eyes, noting Marcus standing at the counter, Emily's tear-stained face, and the silent customers watching the scene unfold. Back then, Tom continued, I let their judgment define me. Started believing I was what they thought I was. Took me years to understand that their prejudice said more about them than it did about me. He looked directly at Emily. But at least I had a choice about whether to tell people I was a vet. Some folks don't get to choose what others see first. Linda moved closer, her sensible shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. Everyone, let's take a breath here, she said, trying to diffuse the situation. She'd managed the diner for 15 years and had seen her share of conflicts, but this felt different, more fundamental. Emily stood rigid behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly. The shame of her actions mixed with defensive anger, creating a storm of emotions she couldn't quite process. She thought about her own struggles, the rejected art school applications, the mounting bills, the disapproving looks from her family when she talked about her dreams. I've seen you sketch during your breaks, Tom said to Emily, his voice gentler now. You've got talent, but talent doesn't mean much if you can't see the humanity in everyone who walks through that door. The morning sun had risen higher, casting shorter shadows across the diner's worn floor. Regular customers who had witnessed Emily's usually friendly service watched with confusion and disappointment. The contrast between their usual chatty server and this person who had deliberately ignored a customer was stark. Linda placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Why don't you take 5 minutes, she suggested, but Emily shrugged off the touch. I don't need a break, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. I need. She stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. What did she need? Understanding? Forgiveness? A way to justify actions she knew were unjustifiable? The weight of the moment pressed down on her. Every sketch she'd ever drawn, Every dream she'd harbored about her art speaking to people's souls. It all felt hollow now. How could she claim to see beauty in the world when she couldn't see past her own prejudices? Tom returned to his grill, but his presence remained felt in the dining room. The sizzle of bacon provided a soundtrack to the uncomfortable silence that had settled over the diner. Linda hovered nearby, ready to intervene if needed, but seeming to understand that this moment needed to play out. Emily caught her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine. Her face was flushed, her uniform stained, her name tag slightly crooked. She barely recognized herself. The person she thought she was, an artist, someone who saw the world differently, had been revealed as a fiction she told herself. The morning continued its inexorable march forward, but time felt suspended in the diner. The regular rhythm of breakfast service had been disrupted by this confrontation with truth, leaving everyone present to wrestle with their own thoughts and prejudices. Tom found Emily in the break room, staring at her sketchbook without seeing it. "You know," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "admitting you were wrong doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Emily closed her sketchbook, the pages filled with half-finished drawings that now seemed to mock her artistic aspirations. "How do you apologize for something like this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The same way you start any difficult tea conversation, with honesty," Tom replied. He pulled up a chair, the metal scraping against the linoleum floor. "We all have prejudices, Emily. The difference is what we do when we recognize them." Through the break room window, Emily could see Marcus still sitting at the counter. He was talking with another customer now, his manner easy and professional. Several people had approached him, offering apologies for what they'd witnessed. His dignified response only made Emily feel smaller. "I wanted to be an artist because I thought I could show people beauty they couldn't see themselves," Emily said. "But I couldn't even see past my own ugly assumptions." She watched as Marcus smiled at something another customer said, the easy grace of his interactions highlighting her own failure. Tom let the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. "You know what makes great art, Emily? Truth. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." Emily's fingers traced the edge of her sketchbook. She thought about all the times she'd drawn people in the diner, capturing their moments of joy, sadness, contemplation. But she'd never drawn anyone like Marcus. She'd never even tried. "I'm scared," she admitted. The words felt raw in her throat. Not just of apologizing. "I'm scared of what it says about me that I did this in the first place." Through the break room door, they could hear the diner returning to its normal rhythm. The clinking of plates, murmured conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. All the ordinary sounds that usually faded into background noise now seemed to emphasize how extraordinary this morning had become. "Fear's natural," Tom said, "but don't let it stop you from doing what's right." Emily watched as Linda expertly handled the morning rush, moving between tables with practiced efficiency. She noticed how Linda treated every customer with the same professional courtesy, something Emily had thought she did too, until today. The morning sun cast shadows through the break room's small window, creating patterns on the floor that reminded Emily of her abstract paintings. Life was full of shadows and light, she thought. Today, she discovered shadows in herself she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. "He's going to see right through any apology I make," Emily said, voicing her deepest fear. "How can anything I say make up for what I did?" "An apology isn't about making things even," Tom responded. "It's about acknowledging the truth and committing to do better." Emily watched as Marcus checked his watch, probably preparing to leave for his law office. Her window of opportunity for making things right was closing, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. The weight of her actions, and the larger implications they carried, seemed too heavy to move. Emily emerged from the break room, her decision made. Each step toward Marcus felt heavier than the last. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving only a few regulars scattered throughout the diner. Before she could reach Marcus, she noticed him studying one of her sketches hanging on the wall, a simple charcoal drawing of the diner at dawn. She'd hung it there months ago, back when her dreams felt more achievable. "Your use of light is interesting," Marcus said without turning around. "You capture the loneliness of early mornings well." Emily stopped, caught off guard by his comment. She prepared herself for anger, for dismissal, but not for this. An actual critique of her work. She began, but Marcus continued studying the drawing. The way you've drawn the empty seats, there's an expectation there. Like they're waiting for something. He turned to face her. Or someone. Emily felt exposed, as if Marcus could see past her defensive walls to the person she wanted to be. I need to apologize, she said, the words tumbling out. What I did was wrong. Inexcusable. Marcus held up his hand. Before you continue, tell me about this piece. Why did you choose to draw the diner empty? The question threw Emily off balance. She looked at her drawing, really looked at it for the first time in months. Because that's when everything feels possible, she said quietly. Before people arrive with their judgments and expectations. Before I have to be anything to anyone. And yet you judged me before I could even order coffee, Marcus observed, his voice neutral. Emily's face burned with shame. Yes, she admitted. I did exactly what I hate others doing to me. I let my own insecurities and prejudices define who you were before I knew you. The conversation paused as Linda refilled Marcus's coffee cup. The familiar action in the midst of this intense moment felt surreal. You know what strikes me about this drawing? Marcus asked, gesturing to the sketch. There's hope in it. Even in the emptiness, there's a sense that something better is coming. Emily found herself looking at her work through new eyes. The empty seats she'd drawn weren't just waiting, they were inviting. They represented possibility, change, the chance for something new to begin. I want to be better than what I showed you today, Emily said. I want to be the person who sees possibility in everyone, not just in empty rooms. Marcus finally turned to face her fully. That's a start, he said. But understand this. Your growth can't come at the expense of my dignity. I'm not here to be your teaching moment. The truth of his words hit Emily hard. She'd been thinking about her own redemption, her own growth, without fully considering the impact of her actions on him. You're right, she said. I am sorry, not just for what I did, but for making this about me. The diner had settled into its mid-morning lull, the breakfast rush giving way to scattered customers nursing cups of coffee. Marcus sat at the counter now, his initial anger replaced by thoughtful consideration. I've worked with several emerging artists through my position on the Arts Council, Marcus said, surprising Emily again. Talent is important, but so is perspective. Understanding different viewpoints, different experiences. That's what gives art its power. Emily listened, her order pad forgotten in her apron pocket. The mention of the Arts Council reminded her of her earlier dreams, before financial reality had forced her to put them aside. I'm truly sorry, Emily said, the words feeling inadequate but necessary. Not because you're on the Arts Council, but because what I did was wrong. I let my own prejudices affect how I treated another human being. Marcus nodded slowly, acknowledging her words. Apology accepted. But remember, this moment isn't the end of something. It's the beginning. Other staff members watched the interaction from a distance, their faces showing mixed emotions. Some looked relieved that the tension had broken, while others seemed uncertain about how to process what they'd witnessed. The Arts Council is always looking for new perspectives, Marcus continued, pulling out a business card. We have a monthly review session for local artists. Bring your portfolio next time. Emily stared at the card, her hands trembling slightly. I don't deserve this opportunity, she said quietly. This isn't about deserving, Marcus replied. It's about growth. Art has the power to change perspectives, including the artist's own. The other diner staff continued their work, but Emily could feel their eyes on her. The morning's events had changed something fundamental in the atmosphere. The comfortable routines of the diner felt different now, charged with new awareness. Tom watched from the kitchen, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The sizzle of bacon and eggs provided a steady backdrop to this moment of transformation. Your art shows promise, Marcus said, standing up and leaving money for his still unserved coffee. But promise isn't enough. You need to be willing to confront the uncomfortable truths in yourself before you can hope to speak truth through your art. Emily held the business card like it was made of glass. This gesture of opportunity in the face of her discrimination made her previous actions feel even more shameful. The rest of the staff maintained their distance, their silence speaking volumes. Some had worked with Emily for years, and this glimpse of her prejudice had changed how they saw her. She knew rebuilding trust would take time. Over the next few days, a subtle transformation took place at the diner. Emily and Marcus developed an unexpected professional relationship, with him stopping by during quieter moments to discuss art and offer guidance. "Your technique is strong," Marcus said one morning, reviewing sketches Emily had tentatively shown him. "But your subjects are limited. You're drawing what you think people want to see, not what needs to be seen." Linda observed these interactions from her office doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. The diner's regulars had started whispering about the unlikely friendship forming between the waitress who had shown such prejudice and the successful lawyer who had chosen to respond with mentorship instead of anger. "There's an upcoming exhibition focusing on social justice themes," Marcus mentioned while Emily refilled his coffee cup, something she now did without hesitation. "You should consider submitting work." Tom continued to encourage Emily's artistic pursuits, but now his support came with gentle challenges. "Art isn't just about beauty," he reminded her during a slow afternoon. "It's about truth, even when that truth makes people uncomfortable." The diner's dynamic had shifted. Emily's initial act of discrimination had exposed underlying tensions, but her visible efforts to change and grow had opened up new conversations among the staff. Some shared their own experiences with prejudice, while others admitted to confronting their own biases. "Your drawings are starting to show more depth," Marcus commented, reviewing a new sketch Emily had done of the diverse morning crowd. "You're beginning to see people, not just customers." Linda still watched these interactions carefully, aware of her responsibility to maintain a professional environment. But she couldn't deny the positive impact this situation had ultimately had on her staff and the diner's atmosphere. Tom had become something of a bridge between Emily and her co-workers, helping them understand that growth often comes from confronting our worst moments. His steady presence and quiet wisdom helped ease the lingering tension. Emily started incorporating more diverse subjects into her art, challenging herself to capture the full spectrum of humanity that passed through the diner's doors. Each sketch became an exercise in seeing beyond surface appearances. The transformation wasn't just in her art. Emily's interactions with customers changed, becoming more genuine and thoughtful. She found herself really seeing people for the first time, noticing details she'd previously overlooked. The relative peace at the diner was disrupted when an older customer, overhearing Emily and Marcus discussing the upcoming art exhibition, muttered loudly enough to be heard. Things were better when people knew their place. The words dropped like a stone into a pond, sending ripples of tension through the diner. Emily, who had been clearing a nearby table, froze. Marcus remained seated at the counter, his posture stiffening slightly. "Excuse me?" Emily said, turning to face the customer. Her voice carried across the now-quiet diner. "Would you care to repeat that?" The customer, a middle-aged man in a business suit, looked up from his newspaper. "Just saying what everyone's thinking. This whole situation, it's not natural. You trying to make up for what you did by playing nice? It's all for show." Emily felt her hands trembling, but this time with anger rather than shame. "No," she said firmly. "What's not natural is judging people based on their skin color. What's not natural is thinking anyone has a place they need to stay in." Other customers watched the confrontation unfold. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in agreement with Emily's words. "I've served you coffee every morning for months," Emily continued, her voice growing stronger. "You've seen my art on these walls. You've complimented it. Did you think talent and humanity had a color?" Marcus remained seated, watching the scene unfold. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were intent on Emily's face. "You don't understand," the customer began, but Emily cut him off. "No, I used to not understand. I made a terrible mistake because of that lack of understanding. But at least I'm trying to learn, to be better. What's your excuse?" The diner had gone completely silent. Tom stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, while Linda emerged from her office, ready to intervene if necessary. The customer looked around, perhaps expecting support from other patrons, but found none. Instead, he was met with disapproving stares and head shakes. "This isn't worth my time," he muttered, throwing money on the table and standing up. As he walked toward the door, Emily's voice stopped him. "You're right about one thing," she said. "I'm trying to make up for what I did, not by playing nice, but by facing my prejudices and working to change them. Maybe you should try it sometime." The bell above the door jingled as the customer left, leaving behind a diner full of people processing what they'd just witnessed. The tension in the air remained, a reminder that progress wasn't linear and that fighting prejudice was an ongoing battle. The local art gallery buzzed with activity during the exhibition opening. Emily stood beside her pieces, a series of portraits capturing everyday moments at the diner, including the confrontation that had changed her perspective. Her hands fidgeted with her dress as she scanned the crowd, looking for Marcus. "Interesting choice of subjects," a well-dressed man commented, studying her centerpiece. A charcoal drawing of the morning Marcus had confronted her prejudice. "I'm James Bennett, representing the Riverside Arts Foundation. Marcus Williams suggested I take a look at your work." Emily's heart sank at the mention of Marcus's name. "Is he coming tonight?" Bennett shook his head. "Actually, that's something we should discuss. Marcus has withdrawn his support from this exhibition series. He felt it would send the wrong message to continue his involvement after recent events." The gravity of Bennett's words hit Emily hard. Despite her growth, despite her public defense of Marcus, her initial act of discrimination had cost her a valuable ally. The consequences of that morning continued to ripple outward. "I understand," Emily said quietly, looking at her artwork with new eyes. Each piece now seemed to carry the weight of her mistake, a permanent reminder of how a single moment of prejudice could have lasting impacts. "Your work shows promise," Bennett continued, "but the arts community is small, and reputation matters. Marcus's withdrawal has raised some concerns among our board members." Emily nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Her journey of personal growth, while important, didn't erase the professional consequences of her actions. The art world she dreamed of entering had closed the door before she could even step through it. The exhibition continued around her, but Emily felt disconnected from the buzz of conversation and clinking glasses. Her artwork, meant to document her journey from prejudice to understanding, now stood as a testament to the lasting damage of discriminatory actions. As she stood there, Emily realized that this wasn't just another setback in her artistic career. It was a lesson about how actions born from prejudice create ripples that extend far beyond the initial moment. Her growth and changed perspective mattered, but they didn't shield her from the consequences of her choices. The evening wore on, and though people praised her technical skill, Emily could sense a hesitation in their interactions. The story behind her art had spread, and while some viewed it as a powerful statement about personal growth, others saw it as a reminder of the persistent prejudice that existed even in supposedly progressive spaces. This ending served as a powerful reminder that confronting and overcoming prejudice isn't just about personal growth. It's about accepting that our actions have lasting consequences, even after we've changed. The story comes full circle, showing that while personal transformation is possible, it doesn't erase the impact of our past actions.